American bombers are squeezing Ural industrial investments. A cascading economic collapse has begun in Russia. The entire industry is collapsing. Waiters at all levels are shouting about the impending catastrophe. We really do have a bomb, as you say, a perfect one. And it's the same with the budget. It's a bomb. It's a bomb, seriously.
Overall, basically, if you listen and just look at the whole picture, industrial crises are coming one after another. Oh, and, well, there has also been a lot of talk about the age-related cyclical crisis, a serious crisis in the agro-industrial complex. It seems that the situation in the economy is so bad that the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum has turned into a platform for revolutions. Ministers, bankers, industrialists, even waiters have started to admit that Russia is in a dead end.
It's not just, excuse me, a complete dead end. The economy is literally, truly dead. It's like being very much indeed behind the scenes. The wise crowd in St. Petersburg is not even panicking anymore, but already decadent. Our question is landing, as we just saw in the voting in the hall, and the televisions voted as well. High interesting prices, we understand that. That's precisely why the main discussion today is that the indicators clearly show prices should be lowered, and that we truly need to move from a controlled backstage to an economic backstage. In the completely opposite situation, Putin now looks like a foolish old man who has been completely turned into a lifeless, unmoving statue and tells them long, drawn-out stories about cryptocurrency.
Of course, that's the significant price to pay for such robust economic development. For us, in a rather rapid and somewhat passive phase, it was indeed inflation. What? And here comes the esteemed Minister of Finance, indeed, right now. The Minister of Economy and the head of the central bank are shouting in time that everything is lost. There's no money, production has stopped, and Putin, with his visor down, as if nothing has happened, says how he's going to fight for all of Ukraine. And all this standard nonsense about one man and the feet of Russian soldiers. Well, you know, we have this old well. It's not exactly a prophecy, nor is it a parable, but rather an old saying that circulates within the government, concerning precisely where the Russian soldiers' boot steps. We are currently witnessing the profound and widespread collapse of the global economy, a deeply concerning situation. Considering all the economic forecasts and projections for the current year, which paint a comprehensive picture of the anticipated financial landscape, a notable incident occurred involving an individual widely recognized as a staunch supporter of President Putin. This particular supporter, in what appears to be an extraordinary display of bravado, or perhaps a desperate attempt to muster sufficient courage, reportedly consumed a substantial quantity of alcoholic beverages. Specifically, it was observed that this individual had downed an entire case of an unspecified alcoholic drink, in addition to half a bottle of vodka. This considerable intake of alcohol was seemingly undertaken to fortify their resolve, before making a rather astonishing and candid declaration. Following this significant consumption, and presumably under the influence of the alcohol, the Putin supporter proceeded to publicly characterize Russia as a valley of death for small businesses. This stark and vivid metaphor suggests a profoundly challenging and perhaps insurmountable environment for entrepreneurial ventures and smaller commercial enterprises within the nation, implying that such businesses face immense difficulties, significant obstacles, and a high probability of failure or demise in the current Russian economic climate. The statement underscores a deep-seated frustration or disillusionment with the conditions faced by the small business sector, despite the individual's usual alignment with the government's narrative. In our country, half of all micro-businesses and startups have already closed in 3 years. A valley of death. German Oscarovich, you spoke about this at the government session. Russia now indeed has 2 valleys of death, a 20-kilometer-long frontline valley, and the rest, stretching from Rostov to Kamchatka. They also mention the specific regions within Ukraine that they consider to be truly and rightfully ours. Yes, I have said many times that I consider Russians and Ukrainians to be one people. In principle, in this sense, all of Ukraine is truly and completely ours. Oh, you must be joking. Some officers are still trying to find softer wording to describe the economic collapse. They are even accompanied entirely in the news. Indeed. Controlled cooling, a slight decline, recovery from overheating, and other nonsense that threatens strong spirits. No matter how long this question has been discussed, a short answer can always be given. Are we experiencing a cooling or a recession right now? No, I would say cooling, but cooling always follows winter. What exactly are you talking about? It's a way of sugarcoating things, you know, a bit like that.
It seems to me that they're not really talking about the Russian economy, but rather about some completely fake atmosphere. Everyone understands that such formulations attract the entire copying pool, which has finally closed off the whole market. Exactly.
Fewer products. Prices are rising. Quality is falling. It seems to me that the word just really sticks. It simply emphasizes all three of these points. Most precisely. Right now, Russia has a truly huge and ever-growing debt in its national budget and within society, and it's expanding every single minute, much like a rapidly accumulating snowball. In the historical context of the Soviet Union, people were fundamentally divided into those who were incarcerated in prison and those who were tasked with protecting them. Now, in contemporary Russia, they are distinctly divided into those who merely have possessions and those who possess a truly significant amount. Now the tax portfolio is 17 trillion. This has never happened before, and indeed, its provision actually causes colossal additional harm to small businesses. German Oskarovich said that 70% of taxes are already in a tight loop. Just imagine the additional costs.
The Russian parallel economy is experiencing a rejection of the workforce. The labor force has disappeared. And where are those hands? Exactly. There is no one left to work where the Russian soldier's foot and the rest of his body are. We are still pouring in. Police vehicles, engineers, and workbenches are being smashed like hinges in Ukrainian zones. There are so few people that at the Economic Forum, they started openly talking about importing more migrants. This is a limitation on personnel and their quality. A limitation on personnel and their quality? Today, small business is the largest employer in the country. 40% of the working population works there. And what do we see? That there are two things. First, we have a terrible shortage of personnel, and we can't manage without migration.
It seems like there could be even more, but obviously, the current shortage of personnel is truly astronomical. It's not for nothing that 25,000 workers from Korea will be rebuilding Kursk. That's quite interesting. Indeed, wouldn't you say? Korea rebuilt Kursk. They will rebuild Kursk. And whose Kursk region is it, indeed? After that, then, the entire industry in Russia began to completely and utterly collapse. Retailers are truly panicking at this moment. They admit that both consumption and production of goods have already decreased. Perhaps, Russians have simply started consuming less food, or there are simply far fewer Russians now. That makes more sense, because the markets themselves are losing people. The same reduction in personnel. Cashiers, security guards, and merchandisers where are the carpenters and plumbers? This reduction exists in every case. By 2028, we will see this year a catastrophe in heavy industry. The head of Severstal complained that the situation is so bad that soon the metallurgical plants will simply shut down. And, as we know, shutting down a steel plant is essentially death. For example, the metallurgical industry, which has traditionally been export-oriented, today cannot export metal products because it is economically unprofitable and simply not viable. The gross economy, for one thing, has shrunk. Plus, there are bans on the nearest markets. Here, in Lydia, European markets have always been present. Therefore, in my opinion, it is not out of the question that even metallurgical production in the Russian Federation could come to a halt. Even the only industry in which Russia could compete with civilized country Aspasia now completely collapsed. It turns out that Moscow can no longer do it. It seems, independently produce satellites. The rector of the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, Dmitry Livanov, stated at the PMF 2025 session that Russia does not have the necessary network of key technologies to create a modern low-orbit satellite. And here is an analysis of how many technological packages are required to create a modern low-orbit satellite, and how this matches the competencies in our country. Today, out of the 13 technological packages required to create an effective operational satellite, we currently only have 4 at this moment. The once great space power does not know how to make orientation sensors, antennas, communication systems, or onboard electronics. But what kind of barbecue are they putting out in the fields? If top criminal officials openly admit to such problems, we can only imagine how truly critical the situation is. Putinomics. Panic and nervousness are simply impossible to ignore. Officials are starting to cut things right in front of the camera. They're turning on each other and shifting the blame for their past mistakes. The Minister of Economy accused the head of the central bank of the fact that, due to the high level of Russian products, there is no competence in the international market. In response, Nabiullina said that it has always been incompetent. Why, for example, are we currently having such a hard time on international markets? Well, basically, we're closing them off to ourselves. Because our locomotive 15, are we closing them off to ourselves, or are they closing them off to us? We're closing them off to ourselves because 15 to 20% of our locomotive is competent when it leaves the factory, so to speak. But when, for example, Chinese money is added to the Chinese locomotive over a period of 70 years, we lose the same 20%. It's all because our money is simply expensive. Andrei Mikhailovich, may I ask you something? 2 years ago we had very low prices. Do you remember? And then, what closed the market for our locomotives? But you'd better wait, because we are in. In other words,
No. Nobody truly wants Russian products for free. Not at all. While the entire world is switching to advanced nanoprocessors, no one will ever really need a nano samovar with nano gingerbread. Absolutely not. However, the sources say that this is about buying potatoes.
some officers, on the contrary, shut off their emotions and, trying to shield themselves from problems, act as stiff as a wooden bow. The scientists almost speak Russian. We specifically arranged it so that we had one Tajik group. For Russia, it's cold. September 1925. There are no more illusions about a bright future. Ahead lie only rockets and pogroms against migrants, who are replacing the local population. And when the money paid to the military inevitably runs out, we can expect yet another significant move from the cruiser Aurora. Of course, the GRU is still around at that particular point in time. Thanks to the statements and silence of Russian economists and officials, we can confidently say that economic decline has begun in Russia, and this Titanic is starting to go down. The only thing still functioning is the military-industrial complex, like the string quartet that kept playing as the ship was sinking. The main outcome of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the suggestion that the fate of the Soviet Republic death was destined for Russia as well. The Russian state will collapse because, like the Soviet Republic, it cannot fulfill its basic functions. There is currently no money, and no one will be able to hold on financially.
Because the fundamental needs of the workers will continue to grow and expand constantly over time without ceasing. And the state may not have enough financial resources to adequately address these ever-increasing needs. The state? Socialism collapsed solely because it could not fulfill this. The fundamental economic law, and we haven't even written our own fundamental economic laws. Thank you. Of course, we had another positive supporter. Moscow agreed with the Taliban that they would send thousands of workers to Russia. And in honor of this significant event, the Taliban flag was prominently displayed in St. Petersburg. Bonds, orthodoxy, everything that we truly love. I mean, this is what we cherish.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.